G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm interviewing Martin Gorm Pedersen from RequirementONE. He's based in Hobart, Australia, here with me. Thanks for your time today, Martin.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Let's start with how we know each other. So a good friend of mine, James McGregor, one of the co-founders of Biteable here in Hobart, a tech company. I had him on episode 6 right back at the start. He brought you along to one of our monthly meetups that we have here in Hobart for small business owners, and that's where we first met.
Indeed, and it's very happy to see that there's a really thriving small business environment here in Hobart after moving here from Europe just recently.
Yeah, and as we've talked about over beer, surprisingly, there's a good number of tech companies in Tasmania. It's a small state for the international audience, 500,000 people, and almost half of those live in the capital of Hobart. But there are a lot of big, successful tech companies here hidden away in the bushland of Tasmania.
Exactly, that's actually the biggest surprise by moving here. So I'm very happy to be amongst peers.
Tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money.
Yeah, well, my business is RequirementONE, and we help companies action regulatory change. And we do that by having created one of the largest data lakes in the world that in real time indexes regulatory developments from any regulator or industry body in any language, and then standardizes and streamline all that information. And then we allow any regulated firm to pick up any area of interest, any topic. It could be anything from data privacy to anti-money laundering or cyber, and then take appropriate action. So it means that we can do this at scale, and we can help companies become compliant. And we do it by selling this as a subscription, both for the access to the content and the users. So we are a classical SaaS business.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I would love to talk unit economics in a moment because it's one of my favorite business models, the SaaS model, subscription, recurring revenue, etc. But I've got 2 questions which I'm sure the audience would be interested in. Given obviously the popularity of ChatGPT late last year in 2022, the first question is, does your software already include some component of AI? And the second question is, do you see AI being a threat or an opportunity for you into the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So we already incorporate AI at a number of key points in our software, but we are very, very subtle about how we do it. So we don't sort of say to the user, now you engage with AI. we more look at the engagement and the workflows that the customer goes through. And then at particular points through those workflows, we help the customer make better decisions. Or suggest what they can do next using AI. So it becomes a very subtle influence, but at the same time, it adds a lot of value to the customer and makes it easier for them to do their job more quickly. In terms of whether it's a threat, I only think it's a threat for the companies that have spent millions, if not tens of millions, on developing their own AI models that they've trained that now suddenly has been rendered obsolete or no longer a moat because of the AI systems coming out, such as ChatGPT. Yeah. But generally, for the other 99% of the market, I think it's a huge opportunity. And as with most technology, if I think back when I started about 20 years ago, then we had questions around whether you could transact online or whether you could store enough data. All those technological limits no longer exist. And the same applies to AI. It's about finding a business problem and then applying the technology in just the right way to solve that problem. And that's where your competitive differentiator comes in, combined with execution.
Yep, absolutely. So how did you start out?
Well, I actually grew up on a farm in northern Denmark, but I was fortunate enough to have dad that worked at IBM. So I was probably one of the first kids in Denmark to get an IBM PC at home. And I started coding when I was 10 or 11. And then when I was 15...
I started coding when I was 10 as well, but on a Commodore 64.
Yeah, I had a Commodore 64 as well next to it. And I just started coding. Of course, I liked the games, but I actually liked understanding the computer and how it worked even more. So I started ordering big books from the US on different programming languages. And I think when I was around 15, then my parents started getting calls from different businesses that needed help. And then I started my first software business. And then since then I sort of thought I would get a bit of experience. So I went to the big city of Copenhagen and tried to get a job at IBM. And they said, we just want to talk soccer with you. And I said, what are you talking about? I want to talk about my business. I was 18 at the time. And they said, no, unless you have a master's or PhD, we don't want to talk to you. So I ended up sitting on the curb outside IBM's headquarters and thinking, okay, what's next? Because I'd flown to Copenhagen and across the street, I saw a small building. It looked like a tech firm. So I walked over and at the reception, I asked for a project manager, and she said, "Do you have an appointment?" I said, "No." And this very confused project manager came down the stairs a few minutes later and said, "Who are you?" I said, "Can I get 5 minutes of your time?" And I sort of gave him a pitch on who I was and what I was doing. And he called a few senior techies in. They asked me a few questions and then said, "Well, nice initiative and thanks for your time. We'll get back to you." So I flew home, and the next morning they said they called me and said, "When can you start?" I said, "How about tomorrow?"
Wow.
And that's really how I got into a more sort of formal software company. And fast forward a year later, I managed to get an introduction to a large software company in the US. Got to talk to the CEO, and he offered me a job on the spot. And then suddenly, when I was 21, 22, I landed in LA and suddenly worked in a really big company. And that's how I got started. And then from there on, I spent a bit of time on business school, but I took a leave of absence very quickly from it. Went back to the US and worked for a number of different startups before I started founding my own companies.
Yep. So in that chapter, what year did you start your first company, and what kind of software company was that?
I started my first software company, I think, for real at scale that was back in 2002, so about 20 years ago. And it was out of the US after I had sort of gotten some of the first experience with working for other startups. And the emphasis we had at that time was purely on a enterprise problem within tendering, RFPs, RFIs. How do you actually digitize that whole process so you don't have to send around documents? And we successfully built up a customer base that could do that, both in the US and in Europe. But I think one of the big mistakes we made, even though we were just starting to get some steam, was that I went out and started to raise capital. I'd never done that before. So again, PowerPoint under the arm, start to get introductions, probably did 45 or 46 presentations before I got the first yes. And we raised the first 300K US. And I was super happy, young guy starting an IT company. Somebody wants to give you money. You're a champ of the world. And what I didn't realize was that it was dumb money. It was a group of business people and lawyers, etc., that knew nothing about software. They knew nothing about go-to-market. They were clueless. They just had a lot of money, and they thought that they wanted to have some fun investing. So we got the money, we started spending it, and we were starting to grow. And then at some point, we ran low on capital. I went back to them and said, okay, guys, see, now we have our first couple of references. Now we need to put in some more money, or we need to go out and raise external capital. And they said, we think that you should just take your phone and your good shoes and go out and knock on doors. I said, that's not how an IT company works, a software company works. And so I'll just go out and find capital elsewhere. And they said, stop clause 72.b says that you need to ask us for any material decisions. And I said, what's that mean? Like, of course I can go out and raise capital if that's in the best interest of the company. I said, nope, you can't. So if you want to take money, you have to take it at us and we decide the valuation. I said, yeah. So long story short, that did not end well. And the company ended up actually dying from it because they were super stubborn. I tried to bring in senior advisors that could talk to them, and they just said, not interested. It's our way or the highway. So big lesson number one, make sure that you qualify any kind of controlling interest you bring into your company, whether it's investors or otherwise, and make sure that they actually are smart money also in the longer run. or that you have an ability to get out of it or maneuver the company in a direction that is right for the company.
Yep. And what was next after that shit show?
We actually really got hooked on the whole concept of enterprise collaboration. There were still so many documents flying around, Word documents, spreadsheets, etc., to go after things, and we were really, really good at any kind of project work. So we got engaged in quite a few different projects, and what we realized was that requirements, like managing requirements, user needs, business requirements, functional requirements, all these different requirements that are really important to get formalized and described. People still did it in documents. It's very hard to operationalize. So we built a new platform, and I think that's really been the trend for my whole career, is that I like to look at a big, hairy business problem and then come up with a platform for it. So we built a platform to manage requirements. And we also had quite a bit of success there. We ended up acquiring tens of thousands of users from all over the world because it was a really big problem at the time. There were no really good tools. And at that time, I also started to get stretched quite a bit because running a company, starting to hire the first people, then suddenly you need to figure out what you're good at, right? Or not figure out, but you have to drop down on what you're good at. And I was very, very technical on 50% of my time. So I sat with the developers, I did algorithms and very, very technical, but I was also very businessy on the other 50%. So I had this internal dialogue about, do I want to be the leader or do I want to be the technical lead? And at that time, I was still a bit young, still a bit wet behind the ears, even though I'd experienced some things. So I decided to bring in a CEO that could run the business. And I actually got along really well with this guy. He was a very good guy, very kind, very understanding, very smart, and also somewhat wealthy. So he had some room, even though he normally were really well paid in big companies. He had some room to go into a smaller business and maybe not take as big as a pay. But what happened slowly in the conversations was that the strategic direction of the company got flavored by the new CEO's personality. And he had a personality, while he was a very good human, then he also believed that everything in the world had to be free. Everything had to be free for the masses, right? So he started driving our whole requirement platform, which was commercial at the beginning, over into a free model, almost like a Wikipedia model, to give it for free to the masses. And again, fast forward 2 or 3 years, then of course I could only go one way because no revenue takes a business only one place, and that's actually that became the end of it. And we sort of had to break up at that time. So again, second big lesson is make sure that you have a strong commercial model that people are willing to pay for. Because as we normally say that revenue cures all evils. You need to generate business. You need to create a sustainable business that has a strong growth plan, growth map ahead of it. You cannot rely on just having a lot of users for free.
No. And so any other businesses before you started RequirementONE?
And I also have done advisory business on the side because I have had quite a few companies of various sizes, both big organizations and startups, come to me and ask, can you help us? Because my absolutely key strength is that intersection between technology strategy and business strategy and grouping or bridging those two areas. That's absolutely my superpower, being in that middle and coming up with an innovative market approach plus technology platform. And of course, I love giving back to also especially startups. So helping any way I can is high on my agenda personally.
Great. And what year did you start RequirementONE?
We started RequirementONE 3 years ago. We're actually just coming up to our third birthday. And that came after, I would say, probably the first sort of proper grown-up senior entrepreneurial analysis from end to end, rather than just jumping out in it and figuring out what to do. So a few different things that I've taken from my journey so far was The team, right? I'd come across a couple of key people that I worked with, and those were the people that I started to start this with. So that was really, really important for me to get the team right. And it can either be full team or it can be fractional, and we can dwell into that or dive into that a bit more. The second one was that we wanted to go after a really big business problem, and the conversations we had was based on conversations with advisors and previous board, and also going out into the market to do some workshops and do some market analysis. And what we realized was that within compliance, and especially within financial services, but generally for any highly regulated organization, compliance was a real big headache. And we found out that there was one particular problem that really were haunting these organizations. And that was to keep up with the onslaught of regulatory change that happened every day, day in and day out, and even in multiple jurisdictions, or maybe even in multiple languages that they had to keep on top of. So we started really going deep on that and understanding, how do you solve this? What are the problems? What are the workflows? What is the business value? What would people attribute in terms of monetary value to getting this solved? And based on that, we came up with a go-to-market strategy for the first 24 months that was very much focused, laser focused on going out and finding the first enterprise anchor clients. So we did not decide to do a pitch deck and then go out and raise other people's money. We actually went in the other direction and say, if we can't, with our expertise, go out and land the first anchor clients and show that the business is sustainable, then any amount of other people's money will not make a difference. And it also, of course, meant that we would be in control for longer. So what we did was that we went out and then we started talking to enterprises. And we quite quickly actually landed the first enterprise anchor clients. And we used them in two ways. First of all, we got them to fund the process. And that was really key, because if you get somebody to pay for you or your services or your idea or concepts, that's the first big validation or proof point, both for yourself, but also for the market. And the other bit is that if you get that collaboration and that commitment, then you get buy-in. And from that buy-in, you learn a hell of a lot, right? You understand what are the pain points, what are the problems, how do they operate? And in some cases, the customer doesn't know. They actually don't know how to get better. They just know that it hurts. And that's where, of course, you bring your expertise to the table and say, okay, let's do some experiments. Experiment 1, 2, and 3. Let's deploy them rapidly. Quick time to failure. Will this help you? And then we basically spun up prototypes, tested it, and then surveyed the users. And then based on those experiments, we then doubled down on particular use cases that we then perfected. And that's sort of the approach we took. And again, I can say now that when we came up to sort of just after the second year, and this happened during COVID at the same time, so it's not an easy time, was that we actually reached those milestones, and that put us in a really good position to go to market and scale further.
And so you launched in 2020, 3 years ago. How old were you when you launched this business?
3 years ago, I was 41.
Yep. Great.
Yeah.
And do you have some key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of the business?
Yes, year on year, we've had somewhere between 35 and 40% growth in our subscription base, plus some services on top. And we have very, very high activation numbers on our user base. On a daily active number, we have around 45% to 50%. And actually on a weekly and bi-weekly level, we are all the way up close to 90%. So there's a very, very high engagement with our platform and the content we provide.
That's great. Fantastic. And how many full-time equivalent team members did you start with, and where are you at now?
So the last part of our analysis when we started the company was actually team. And what we doubled down on was the caliber of the people that we brought in, so that we wanted to take a strategy that was much more SWAT team and less big army. So we have 6 people in our core team that are all sort of very high performing A players. And then we have another 12 to 15 fractional employees that come in and do specific things in the business. And we put a number of systems in place to manage this, which is another key. Really is that you have the systems in place to scale.
Yep. So what would the full-time equivalents be for those fractional people, 12 to 15? So
It actually fluctuates a lot. Sometimes it will probably could be 4 or 5. Sometimes it could be 15. It fluctuates.
yeah. So say around 12 full-time equivalents at the moment?
Yes.
Yeah. And how many full-time equivalents did you have when you started 3 years ago?
It was just the two founders plus probably one extra full time, so 3.
Yep. Okay. So great. So it was yourself and a business partner that started?
And my co-founder, Dane, again, the best person I've ever worked with, and we supplement each other really well. And I think that's really maybe another point to hit home is that if you start a business or a small business, don't do it alone. Go out and find a co-founder or at least a strong management team, even though if it's only 2 people,
Yeah.
then that is key because you're going to have so many obstacles and so many ups and downs on your journey that having somebody to work those obstacles with and share them with is priceless.
When was the moment you felt like you had succeeded?
I would say what's really driven me from really early on, from the really the first real full-on company I started in the US, what has really driven me that really is a mojo in my heart is subscription businesses. It's SaaS. You know, I met Mark Beanhoff that started Salesforce when he struggled to get 20 people in a room to talk about Salesforce. And I really got inspired by him and how he talked about SaaS. I was young, so I was influenced. But having that subscription business is solving real problems for clients, and then having that run while you sleep, that is really the metric of success personally, right? From a business point of view, it's of course the subscription KPIs.
Yeah. So does that kind of answer the next question? What does success look like to you?
Success. Okay, now I would say success for me is sort of twofold. One is achieving what I just described, but the other one is actually being able to have a business or start a business that does not rely on you.
Mm.
And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges that any founder sits with, because you are such a key ingredient to whatever you've created. And being able to create the systems and playbooks and bringing people in that can replace you, so that you are not critical to the business is number one. Because not only does it provide the growth path for your business, but it also buys back your time. It frees up your time to actually go out and do what you're best at.
Yep.
Instead of being bogged down on back office or other kind of engagements, then you can focus where your superpower is. And that's why most value is created for your business.
Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast-growing business?
Well, in terms of marketing, I would say, I think it's actually been one of the big mind shifts for me in my entrepreneurial endeavors, is how you think about going to market. Because I think in previous companies, we were very focused on going out and creating as much noise as possible. We wanted to hit all the conferences. We wanted to get into the media. We wanted to, post lots of things on Twitter and LinkedIn and all that. And the problem was that it became more about creating noise than it actually generated real results. So what I would say is, based on what I described before in terms of what our plan was go out and find real customers with real problems and solve that really well first, and getting that basis. When you have those proof points and you have that ideal customer profile, and you have that product market fit, that's when you start to focus on, okay, how do you grow? How do you go out and bang the drum? How do you get as many people within your ICP profile to learn about you as possible? But wait until you have that product market fit before you start to hit the drum. And when you then do that, then you can start to get intelligent about how you go to market. Because yes, you can start to put it on advertising. Yes, you can start to get into the industry magazines, etc., etc. But sometimes there are also some really interesting partnerships that can actually give you a massive boost very quickly. And I think that's probably the other mind shift I've had is in terms of what does a partner look like? And a partner is not necessarily somebody that you think, oh, it would be really nice to work with these guys. It is more a partner that would have a very high percentage of their customer base being your customers, right? So within your ICP, if you can find a partner that has 80, 90% plus of their customers, that is your ideal customer profile, then that's the kind of partner that you want to go after and either do webinars with or do other kind of activities with, because they would have an interest in your expertise because it makes them look good to their customer base. And on the flip side, you get a lot of exposure into a customer group that is ideal for you.
Yeah, no, that's very smart. And do you have any metrics on, I know you don't use Net Promoter Score, but customer engagement and loyalty or satisfaction?
Yeah, generally, again, we look, as I mentioned previously, on the daily active, so how many engages with our platform, and that's meant that's quite high. It's 50% plus that are daily active. So that is really the key for us. But then we also start to look at how many minutes does a customer spend in our platform, and again, that is anywhere from half an hour to 45 minutes a day that they spend on it. And that's actually also a key metric for us, because what we've done is that we've automated what they had to spend most of the day on from a manual point of view, maybe 80% plus of the time. And then we dropped it down to actually giving them all the relevant information in half an hour.
Yep. And funding this business, so it's just been pre-sales or, you know?
Good question. As I mentioned, then we've had some varied experience with investors. So we were a bit cautious about, investors and getting the right investors in. And we were also quite dogged in saying this team has to be able to deliver through the pre-sales. So that's what we did. However, we were chased and are continuously being chased by a number of different investors because we're within a high growth market. And one of these investors was a family office out of Canada that actually kept chasing us and was very structured in their approach. And we had really, really good chemistry with them. And we actually ended up taking an investment from this family office. We actually did it more from there are two strategic concerns. One was that we'd like to get associated with a big brother, big sister that could help us when we need it. But it would also a credibility point of view because the number of bigger clients we worked with actually asked who you're funded by. And we could say, well, we're funded by this family office. And that helped us create the story.
Great. If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
If we had plenty of funding, I would definitely still do a subscription business and assess. That's a given. I just have such a great passion for the problems that where that business model applies. Whether I would go into financial services, it's a maybe. You have to be a bit masochistic to work with financial services because they are complicated organizations. There are lots of rules, there's lots of red tape, lots of procedures. So we really have to want it, but the reward is also there. So I think it depends on what you want to solve and who you want to go after.
Yeah, I think if I could go back in time, like SaaS really began in the early 2000s, didn't it? Or mid 2005, something like that. It's certainly an area in hindsight I wish I had have gotten into. I also love that recurring revenue model and building a kick-ass product and focusing on the marketing and serving a good market. The unit economics of lifetime value and CAC and that ratio is just I find really fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also comes back that you need to pick a market that is big, right? There needs to be a total addressable market that is large, because then you always have flexibility in maneuvering, whether competition comes in or whether you want to pivot into a different solution area that might give you quicker scale.
Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so audience can learn from it?
Yeah, stressful points. I would say there's constant stress in startup, but the big ones, the biggest ones, have really been from some of the previous companies. It has been getting in bed with the wrong people. It has probably been the biggest stressor of all. I would say we talked a little bit about bad fit investors, but there's also been bad fit key members. Like I remember in a previous company where we hired a person that really had on the paper, had a lot of experience, knew the industry, knew the clients we wanted to go after, said all the right things, and we kept giving this person more and more time because, oh yes, there was an excuse for why we didn't get this meeting, I didn't get this client, etc. But what we also then ended up realizing was that the personality of that person was toxic. It did not match our team at all. And I even experienced, and you would probably laugh at this, even though it's really, really sad. This person said, I think we should all do a personality test. Said, okay, I'm all for tests and making sure that you create good teams, good team structures, etc. Said, okay, fine, we'll do a personality test across the management team and key employees. And we did this employee.
Sorry, which one did you use?
I actually don't recall the one. It was one of the standardized ones. And we sort of did the tests, and then we got into this meeting, and the person got off right away and said, we can see here that I score really well on leadership. And we were sort of like, really? And therefore I should be the CEO. So do you all agree? Okay, and I can see the rest of you, you're doing okay in your areas. At that point, I decided that person can only lead the team as fast as possible, right? But it probably cost us 6 to 9 months of team effort. And it actually ended up costing 2 of our other employees employment with us because of the toxicity of that person. So
yeah, A players only want to work with other A players, and especially they don't want to work with arseholes. So it's another hidden cost people don't realize.
Exactly. There's definitely an arsehole scenario.
It's another thing, a hidden thing that people don't recognize. I think that if you don't move on exiting someone that's not right for you pretty quickly, then your A players are going to start wondering about your leadership and management if you're competent, and if they're not happy, they'll move on.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, people heard me say, Martin, I believe people are the hardest thing in small business and where the value's at. And also that small business owners particularly don't value recruitment, don't do it well, don't swat up on it, learn how to get better at it. So we've recently just launched our Ultimate Recruitment Toolkit for that exact reason. It's a 2-week short course for business owners to learn quickly the best practices around hiring and use our playbook, drop it into their ops manual. So next time they go to hire, they're not going to fuck it up.
Yeah. I think one of the things I've also seen with a number of founders that I've met, some more experienced, some less experienced, is that the founders are actually their own biggest obstacle.
Yep.
Because you need to have a willingness to learn. If somebody comes in and says, you should try to go to market this way, have you thought about this? Or on recruitment, do this, or on the system side, do this. Then if they don't listen, then it's really hard to get through. And it's one of the things that I do constantly is I really try to learn almost on a daily basis, follow a number of different newsletters. So I actually have a really nifty tool called Unroll that takes all of my newsletters and aggregates it into one newsletter that I can get on a daily basis, so I can skim it almost like my own newspaper. And again, just keep learning, right? I would also say that buying back your time is really important. So I've systematized my everyday completely. I have certain days I do anything related to growth, certain days on product, certain days on automation. And even on the automation part, I've automated all my both regular mail and email down to a level where I have big spreadsheets that have all the rules for how post and regular email should be processed. And I can hand that over to a virtual assistant.
Yeah.
So that means that, again, you get more time to do what you're best at. Any kind of back office, whether it's accounting or other back office activities, get it outsourced and pick a provider that works in a way almost as a SaaS, right? We, for example, have an accounting firm that provides both the accounting platform, like the software, that all of their people are trained on, and they provide it as a subscription model, and they deal with everything that a small business needs. It is out of the UK, but again, another example of how you automate and systematize all the things that you need to take care of in a business so that you can spend the time on where you add value.
Yeah, it's not just freeing up that time also, I think, because the minutiae, the small admin and things like that, it also saps your creativity, so it's freeing up your time and your creativity to be able to work on the business, not just, yeah.
Absolutely. So,
what area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
I think go-to-market strategies and making it repeatable is by far the hardest. Like no comparison. Yes, we are very good at building technology. We're very good at building platforms, and we are probably some of the best around for doing that. And that is a key to solving our customers' problems. But converting that into, okay, let's go out to these ideal customers at scale and creating a repeatable go-to-market strategy without pouring tons and tons of money in getting some sort of traction is by far the hardest. Everybody can create a small business if you put in the graft and you have some smarts, but creating a scalable business that keeps growing systematically, super hard.
What have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth?
I would say, again, large teams, managing people is not something that I enjoy. I need to work with self-starters. I need to work with people that are really super good at what they do, and then work with small teams. Large teams is not something that I'm a big fan of.
Yeah.
Personally. Yeah, I need somebody to do that for me.
Yeah, I'm the same. I can't. Yeah. I don't want a business more than 30 team members, especially these days. What do you love most about growing a small business?
I think the opportunity. Like I wake up every day and think about where we're at and where we can take it and what we need to do to get there. I think the opportunity is really what drives me. And the opportunity is a mix, right? It's supposed to help the clients and see the happiness that they get from before and after. But it's also just a big commercial opportunity. Like, how do you go out and make a dent in the universe? That really drives me.
What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
It might sound like a really obvious statement, but focusing on what matters. And it comes back to some of the things that I talked about previously. I recruited very, very strong boards and advisory boards in my previous companies, senior vice presidents, CEOs, etc., from various target organizations, etc. And they were fantastic people. The problem was they had never started a company before, taking it to market, right? So we spent a lot of energy recruiting people and making it look good. We spent a lot of time at conferences in the early days. It didn't matter for the stage we were at, right? So mapping what matters to a particular stage and then doubling down on getting that right and continuing to get it right has been really, I think, the biggest mind shift. And it has cost us time and energy and effort and tears. But sometimes, again, you have to experience the scars before you then have that shift, right?
Yeah, that's right. The number one habit you think a small business owner needs?
Without any doubt, continuous learning. Like from a personal point of view, I learn every day. Like, and by learning, okay, how do you learn? Well, you can find a recommended book, from how to grow a small business. You have a lot of good recommendations. But it's also just following blogs or following the media or the news, or if there's some of the new developments that take place, you hear about it. Could be, I don't know, AI or whatever it might be. Try it out, right? Read about it. What do people say about it? Get your fingers dirty. Not necessarily with a particular purpose. Oh, I need to go through this training so I can achieve this, but just learning and staying up to date on what happens. And it's across the board. It's whether it's your operations or go to market, marketing or product. I think is really important. And then secondly, get together with people that are in the same shoes as you. A bit like with the meetups that you run, which I found incredibly useful here in Hobart. Sharing experiences. Like, I've had conversations with people that run businesses very different from mine, but there's always an insight or an opinion that will help you formulate your next move or your next thought. So yeah, get together with like-minded people, or not necessarily like-minded, but people that are in the same shoes as you.
Yeah, no, it's great advice.
Yeah.
Jump over to growersmallbusiness.com and leave your details to get a short 2-minute email I send on Fridays to help small business owners like you become better leaders. I include some reading or professional development resources I've discovered in the last week.
Can you talk how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening?
We have had really big wins in situations where we were faced with a big sales opportunity, but where we maybe historically would have tried to pump up ourselves to say, oh, we're big and we know everything and here's the big framework, etc. Where instead, where we got the really big wins, where we actually approach this with much more humility. So even going into a big organization and saying, this is what we're really good at. This is what we understand. And we'd like to work with you to understand exactly what your problems are. Having that humility actually has given us some big wins, because even though it might be some really big organizations or suits that are on the other side, they're also humans, right? So if you show some credibility in terms of that you are good at what you do, but you also are very clear that you don't know everything, as opposed to some sort of salesperson that just says we can do it all. I think it's probably where we've had the biggest wins, and we try to have that humility in all of our interactions, whether it's new hires or it's big clients.
If you're looking for humility in your team members, and how do you test for that during hiring?
It's conversations, many conversations. Again, you can learn. There's a famous saying, there's reason for why you have one mouth and 2 ears, right? Listen, right? Ask them to describe the journey. What kind of, again, the classical questions. What have you done you're proud of? What really motivates you? What are you passionate about? Where have you failed? Give them some of the scenarios you have in your business. So if it's somebody that sits on the go-to-market or marketing side, then give them a problem that you have or a challenge you have right now from your business, because you already would have discussed it a lot internally. See how they respond to that. Are they on the same page? Do you learn something new from them? Are they bringing more to the table than what you already have? And are they then doing it in a way where they have that self-awareness and that humility? Or are they just saying, this is how it is, right? Conversation. Again, I remember, one of the people you brought in for the meetup, Scott Ross from the Jack Jumpers, the head coach, and talking about how he recruited the basketball players. And again, it really resonated with me also based on similar experiences, that you have many, many conversations with people before you understand what really motivates them. And that is the key. Like I had let me give you an example. We had one of our key developers that I've now worked with more than maybe 12, 15 years. Super sought after, being offered job after job after job from big companies, and his salary got doubled every time. Like, he makes more than most CEOs. But what he didn't have in his life, he didn't have any fun. He wanted to work for startups, right? He wanted to work for small companies. And what I realized was that he had a number of kids, and he had a wife that wanted to go see his sisters. And his challenge was actually getting time. So I organized for his wife to go see his sisters, organized the airfare, organized the spa, all of that, help with getting the kids looked after. And then suddenly he could deliver the key value input for our business, right? So again, what motivates people? It's all about that, and it's not always money.
No, that's true. Very, very true. It's usually fifth in a lot of HR surveys why people choose to work where they do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think back to the point of recruiting, getting them to talk as much as possible, 80% of the time, the candidates, so you can really get to understand them, but also importantly for your gut to get as much data so you can make a decision on if this person has the traits that you need, as you said before, like humility. A lot of business owners just rush recruitment or do a lot of the talking themselves instead of letting the candidates show themselves.
Yeah, and then I think also it's very healthy. And this is probably the key one after you then think you have a match, is to try it out, get to work with people, and then don't commit for a 5-year contract if you can do 6 months of testing first, and then make a decision.
That's it. What are some of the things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
I think there's always a lot of talk about culture, right? And I actually am very down to earth about culture because I believe the culture comes from within the people that you hire. I don't need to create a culture where we have I don't know, table tennis and swanky offices and do cool trips together or whatever to say now we're a cool company. That's just cherry on top. I think the culture that's really important for me comes down to some traits, and that comes back to the recruitment. So the traits are always do your best, right? Always do your best. Be kind and be open, right? Fess up to the mistakes you made. If you make a mistake, that's okay.
Yep.
I don't care if you cost us a big client. If you are upfront about it, just let's learn from what went wrong and then do better next time. I think that kindness and openness and honesty and own your wins and own your mistakes is key. And if you start to have that kind of personality traits in your team, then culture comes.
Tell our audience how you've handled balance.
That's a good question. Balance what? No. I know balance. I would say also as I'm getting older, I'm probably getting better at it. I remember in the early days, I could put in easily 250, 300 hours a month. Just push. And what you didn't realize was that you have to remember to sharpen your saw, right? So that you cut that tree faster next time. And so the balance I have is that again, I've time boxed my activities. I talked about it a little bit earlier, and putting in 12 or 15-hour days actually doesn't help. It actually makes you less efficient.
Yep.
So time box your activities, and that also including looking after yourself. So after I moved to Australia, I started bushwalking with mates. So it's really something that get you out into nature and clear your head, and something I enjoy. I've also been an avid jogger, so I run on a regular basis because that physical well-being is also a key part of being able to perform in your business. So I think those two are the key areas.
Yep. How much professional development have you invested in yourself?
Again, I would say continuously. So I don't do it in a way where, okay, let's do, I don't know, a mini MBA and then spend 3 days every week on that. It is much more targeted or focused. So there might be a course on, I don't know, new technology, because again, we are a tech business. Go after it, learn it. It might just be a few sessions. It might be listening to podcasts that are of interest within a particular area. So again, I would take professional development as a more holistic approach.
Have you had mentors or coaches along the way?
Yes, continuously. I've always gone out and found people that I could learn and brought them in either formally via boards or advisory boards or more informally. And it has also changed over the years. What I've actually found, and I don't know if it's good or bad, but I've pretty much outgrown every mentor I've had in the last 20 years. Right? And I think with that, I'm also trying to say that mentors are not always people that can be alongside you for the long haul. Yeah. It's people that can help you at a particular point in your life or company's development. And then you really need to keep your eyes and ears peeled for what other people are there that you might be able to work with and collaborate with. And I think actually it goes both ways, because some mentors actually also really like and enjoy working with companies because they get something out of that. Maybe there's something they don't have in there every day, and you can learn from them as well.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree totally. Do you have a board of directors or advisors at the moment?
Yes, we have a couple. Scaled down compared to previous businesses, because in previous businesses, we had 6 to 8 people on our boards, and I spent 1 or 2 days a week just preparing presentations and stats and all that, and explaining to them all the things that are going on. And then they said, that looks great, keep doing it. So too many chiefs and not enough Indians. Yeah.
And you're one of the few we've had on that's exited a business. You've exited 2, not so happily, but any Any advice for the audience on exiting?
I would say there are two different kinds of exits. I've actually had two difficult exits where it was a close down, and I've had an exit where it was actually a sale. So in both cases, I would say that the short answer is exit when it's right and the opportunity is there. And it doesn't actually matter whether it's to close down or to exit. And let me maybe unpack that a bit. I've seen friends and companies had an exit opportunity where somebody wanted to come and buy them. And it was a decent offer, right, for what they're in. And they said, nah, I think I can grow the business and get twice as much. That just never materialized, and they put in X number of years to get to that exit point. So that was not a smart move in hindsight, and I've seen that a number of times. So don't let your ego be too big, unless you really want to drive it.
Yeah, I had a mate late 1999, I think it was. He started up a small tech company, literally in his bedroom. And then it was growing like the bejeebers, built a team around it, got a partner involved, an experienced business person to put some capital in and add more team members. In less than a year, I think they got bought by a big US company for millions. And he said, no, time was right. I didn't want to stick around. And then I think 6 months later, the dot-com crash happened. So if he hadn't have had that sense to exit when there was a good offer on the table, he wouldn't certainly be living life the way he is right now.
Exactly. And then I would say also on the flip side, and it can either be a full close down of a business or a pivot, is that, come on, you need to put in the hard yards to test whether your value proposition, product, service, etc., actually has a place in the market. And you will continuously or should continuously learn from that activity that you do every day, every week, every month. However, there might also just be a point where you just didn't get it, or the market changed. And then you need to have a really hard look at what you're doing and be willing to make some hard changes, either people-wise or market-wise, and then maybe pivot in a new direction. And I think I've seen quite a lot of companies live in this zombie land where they sort of have some customers, they're sort of going okay, but they're not really going anywhere, but they can't really think of what else should they do. And that's also where sometimes having some advisors or mentors on the side that is at arm's length is good, to say, okay, people, think about where you're at and whether you want to continue down this path. Is there actually a light at the end of the tunnel, or should you reconsider what you're doing?
All right, Mark, we're on the final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
I think you really need to be cut out for it. Like, you really need to want it, because there are so many obstacles, right? There's so many things you need to deal with, and you need to have that mindset. So it is super hard to build it out, and you need to. And I know that it's sort of an indirect answer to your question, but I think a lot of people dream about starting small businesses, but I think very few people has what it takes.
Yep. It's a shit ton harder than what most people think.
Yeah.
Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
I actually read a book many, many years ago that was called The Millionaire's Mindset. And it comes back to a professor that wrote about why people do well. Okay. And it comes back to the systems. It comes back to how many minutes do you spend when you commute every day in a car, right? So if you spend 2 hours every day where you're not productive, that accumulates over time, right? How do you invest your time in either product or business or services or real estate or whatever it might be, that then gives you a return, that's passive income. So that kind of mindset of how do you hyper optimize your life for wealth, that actually made a really big impact on me.
Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
To be quite honest, I'm a bit all over the place when it comes to that. I actually cherry pick almost on a weekly basis what I like or what I come across. So I'm not religious about any particular. I would say that again, number of the podcasts that Grow Small Business has put online has been really interesting, and it's been really good to hear from other experienced founders what their take has been. So I really enjoyed that. but I'm quite broad in my interests.
One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
I would say I would find somebody, a tool. It's a bit funny, right? I'll go out and find one or two people that have done exactly what you're trying to do, and then get them on board to help you. Either that's right. That is what would give you the biggest impact.
Yeah, that's gold. Great advice. Finally, my favorite question: what would you tell yourself on day one of starting out?
Listen to the podcast we just recorded.
Good one.
I would say make sure what you're trying to achieve is worth it. Go out and find a problem that is real and that people are willing to pay for. And then you work out the rest along the way.
Yep. Well, thanks very much for your time today, Martin. I've really been looking forward to us having a chat and recording it. We've obviously spoken a lot over dinners and beers. It's good to actually get it on recording now. So I really appreciate your time, and congratulations on your growth. You've obviously learned a lot, both with the exits you've had and the current business you have, and growing from 3 to now 12 full-time equivalents roughly. That's terrific growth over 3 years. So well done.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here. And again, for anyone listening, I'll be more than happy to help anyone that needs it.
We're getting some great iTunes reviews. For those listening, please pop over to your podcast app and leave us a review.